Hello, this is Liz Lawless, your co host for Author Adventure and the Art and Biz of Publishing, the Art and Business of Publishing, where we talk about the 5 secrets to author success. We're talking about writing, we're talking about publishing, launching, marketing, and distribution, because those are the 5 things that I feel like are really important for people to know. And under each of those buckets, there's a lot of different things that go on. There are a lot of moving parts, as I often say. But we're having a little technical difficulty, but the show goes on no matter what. And so we're going to skip our secret for this week. We'll be back with that next week. Because I have a excellent person here today, a longtime friend, horror author Brian Moreland, and Brian and I have plenty to talk about. So, Brian, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Liz, and thanks for having me on your show. Good to be here.
You bet, you bet. So usually we kind of start with, how did you start writing? Did you write as a child or not, or did you come to that kind of later? Or I know you had some childhood influences. What was that about, and why did you choose horror? I guess that's the question. How did a baby faced guy like you get into horror? That's kind of scary, because you see you and you go, he's writing horror, and then it's like really scary stuff,
Yeah, well, I guess it started with a love of horror, watching horror movies as a kid. Yep. And I loved monsters for some reason. I guess I was a strange kid, and comic books. And then when I was in my teen years, I started reading short stories by Stephen King and Clive Barker, and that introduced me to fiction, and I had a lot of fun reading horror fiction. And when I was a freshman in college, I was about 19, I decided to take a crack at writing a novel. And I had all these ideas in my head, and so I sat down one semester and wrote out a 113-page horror novel. That's where I discovered I loved the writing process.
Yeah, the writing stuff. And you actually kind of switched majors too, didn't you?
I did. I was business finance for 2 years, and after I wrote that novel, I decided it was more fun being creative than it was learning accounting.
Right.
And so I switched majors and I started screenwriting, and I studied creative writing and novel writing. So I just kind of went that path and didn't look back.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, and so what was your first publishing experience? Because I guess you sent like me. I sent out traditionally, and 50 publishers, and got 47 rejections. And it's like being stabbed in the heart, because you think you got something good, and you hope somebody picks it up. But what was those first experiences like for you?
Well, I was, I'd say after I got out of college, I thought that I was just going to get published right away. And it actually took me about 18 years of writing novels. I wrote several novels, and I submitted them to agents. I submitted them to publishers and got a lot of rejections like you did. I even submitted some short stories to magazines. And I just didn't get discouraged. I just kept writing the next story. And finally, when I was about 38, that's when self-publishing was starting to become an avenue for authors to break into business. So I decided to self-publish my first novel, which was Shadows in the Mist.
Okay, great. And so that's basically a story about the war, isn't it? And the Nazis trying to create the perfect whatever, and kind of capturing up all the supernatural stuff. But it's that there's always that monster in the woods or something.
Yeah, I wrote. It's funny. It was based on a short story I wrote for a screenwriting class in college, and it was set in World War II, and it was about some U.S. soldiers who discovered that the Nazis had created something supernatural, and I just a friend of mine read the short story and said, "You ought to expand it into a novel." So I spent the next 4 years researching and writing the novel. And I had a book that I felt like was my first book to release, and that's when I actually. Here's the book I designed. I hired a book designer, an artist to paint the cover, and editor, and I decided to invest in my career and just to get it going, and that how I broke into the business.
Right, right. Well, and that's the thing. And what we tell people is there are a lot of things you can learn today. There's a lot of information out there, but the things you need to pay for are the cover and an
Yes.
editor. I don't edit
Yes.
my stuff. You don't edit your stuff. I mean, because we're too close to it. We know what it's supposed to say. We read it right. Our mind just goes to the right place, whether
Yeah.
it's here or here, because we have so many words that sound the same, but they're spelt differently. And until you read the sentence, you don't know if we mean, oh, we're going over here, or he's hearing what I said wrong, or what I mean, and so your mind just reads it right. And so
Right.
you gotta do those things. So if you're listening, you're a new author, understand what Brian just said. He said he paid to get the cover done by a book cover specialist, because designing book covers is not like designing logos. It's not like designing flyers. It's a different business, and you really, those are the things that are important for you to invest in, is that and a good editor. So what happened from that with your first book? Was that a good experience, or?
It was. That book went on. I entered it into the IPPY Awards contest, and it won. It won a gold medal for best horror novel. And then I was still wanting to break into traditional business. That was sort of I wanted to get my first book out there, but my long-term goal was always to go traditional route, and get an agent. And that book helped me get my first agent, a New York agent, who I've been grateful to have been with for now well over a decade. And she took that book and immediately sold it to Berkeley Penguin, and they made a mass paperback version of it.
Right.
And there's the IPPY Award. I actually got to go to New York to get the gold medal. That was fun.
That was fun, yeah, for sure. So exciting. So it's an exciting adventure, and everybody's adventure is different. Sometimes it takes you a long time. Most of us have been in it a while before I was in 5 years, and I kind of put it away, and said, well, this is not for me, when I got those 47 rejections. But 5 years later, like you say, self-publishing's coming along, and a client says, well, you've got a children's book, don't you? And I had a manuscript. I didn't have a book, but I had an advertising company, because just like you were in the video film business. You were working on the side doing commercial and learning the business and writing scripts and
graphic design and all that.
Yeah, continuing all that creative activity and action. And so, that's all a part of it, because you just learn as you go. So don't get discouraged. Like Brian said, don't give up. I mean, it took me 10 years. It took him 18 years.
It does.
But it's worked out all right, hadn't it? Because now what was the next thing after that? I guess you did the thing with the traditional publishing. Did you like that? Was that great? Do you wish you'd have do more of that, or did you do more of that, or what kind of, tell us how that kind of went?
Yeah, I've actually continued to do more of that. I now have a sort of a hybrid, because I have some self-published books, and then I have several traditional published books. But then my second book was Dead of Winter, and and I had an agent by that point, and I was lucky. We found a mid-sized horror publisher that specialized only in horror books.
Right.
And they were looking for authors, and so it was sort of like good timing that they were starting up this new horror line right as I was shopping my book around. So my book was one of the first. It was one of the first 5 books released in the very first month of the company, and it's one of the best editors, Don Diaria. He's very well known in the horror business, and he told me, if you'll write me a book a year, I'll publish a book a year, and that's what I did for like the next 5 books.
Right.
I had, I was inspired because I had an editor who would immediately look at my next book,
manuscript and book.
And he also showed me that I could not only write novels, but I could also write shorter works like novellas, which I can write a lot faster. Like Dead of Winter took me 2 years. It's that was set in the 1800s, so there was a lot of historical research to do. And then I wrote some contemporary novellas, The Witching House, Darkness Rising, and The Seekers, and all those got traditionally published, as well as, in fact, the book that I wrote in college, The Devil's Woods. They eventually published that one.
Also, okay. And then this you kind of put together too as a 3-box set. Is that right?
Right.
Did I understand that right too? Good.
Yeah. In fact, that's what I'm.
Okay.
I just re-released. It's called Blood Sacrifices, and it's my 3 novellas: The Witching House, Darkness Rising, and The Seekers, all in one book.
Right.
So,
Right.
in case they want to just get it all together.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So so that's another thing that you can do. So if you're watching or you're listening, I mean, you can write short stories, you can write novels. I mean, obviously Brian's writing fiction. I mean, he's pulling these stories from his imagination. But he does a lot of research. You do a lot of research, don't
Yeah.
you? And I
Yeah.
know you did the same for your recent book about the tombs and about Egypt. And
That's right.
sometimes you visit those places, but a lot of times, you want that historical accuracy in your books. I know, and then like you say, then you weave in all that scary psychological stuff that scares people to death.
Right.
So, but it's usually it's usually some kind of, it's that hero story, and then they're fighting against the evil thing or the monsters or whatever. But there's a lot of thinking that goes into it too, isn't there?
There is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll start with a general idea and start creating the characters, but I write like 100 to 200 drafts before I feel satisfied. I'm very much a
Wow.
perfectionist, so
Yeah.
the story's constantly evolving as I write it, and I may
Uh-huh.
change character names all the way up, and you know after several drafts in. So it's I never really outline my books. It's all organic writing.
Right, right. So you just sit down and write, and
Uh-huh.
write what comes to you as you do. Do you find that once you're in the flow of it, it just starts to come to
It
you, don't
does.
it? I mean, once you've got a few of the things in place, the characters, the setting, the time period or whatever, and the kind of the basic story, and then you just let it flow, don't you?
Yeah, I do. And I write best in the morning when I first wake up and I'm sort of half asleep, still in that dream world state. And I don't know, it's just like I sit at the computer, and you're right, it just flows from somewhere. It just kind of taps into this sort of creative flow.
Yeah.
And as long as you're right, as long as my story has the parameters of the setting, the time period, the characters, and I have a general idea of where it's going, then it's
Mhm.
easier to get into a groove where I just start writing what the character does next, and then what the character does next.
Right, right. Do the characters surprise you sometimes?
Always. They
Always.
usually take over the story, uh, and, the dialogue, I let them I just throw them into situations, especially when I have 2 dynamic characters. I let
Uh-huh.
them talk to each other, and they always say things I didn't plan on writing. It's so and sometimes I'll think the story's going one way, and the characters do something in the scene that shifts the story in a whole nother direction. So I let them take over at some point.
Right, and tell the story that they wanna
Uh-huh.
tell. Yeah, yeah, that's great, that's great. Well, what do you think what's the biggest struggle, do you think? Is it marketing, or is it finding the publisher, or, what's your thoughts on that? Do you have any advice for people that are maybe
Yeah.
watching that wanna get into the business?
Yeah, I've hit struggles at every stage. It was like I said, the first 18 years, I was trying to get an agent. I kept getting rejected, and then when I finally got in, uh, it's been book sales. It's like book sales really sell. Your book may sell really well when you launch the book, but
Right.
then it stays in the market for years, but it can drop out if the sales can drop off, and now I got to figure out a way to remarket it, or you got to keep having another book come out.
Right,
um,
yeah.
so book sales, consistent book sales year after year after year, is has been a challenge.
Yeah, and that's kind of the hardest thing, and marketing for a lot of people. I mean, luckily for people like you and I, we were kind of in a part of the business. There's no question that the fact that I was in marketing and advertising and event management before I got into publishing, that was really helpful for me. And I'm sure that your graphic design and the fact that you were a videographer and a photographer, and that you went out and did, and did that kind of commercial work with businesses, that you just learned skills that helped you with the publishing stuff, I feel sure, didn't you?
Yeah, and it takes, I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. So
Mm-hmm.
being whether I've been an independent author or a traditional author, I've had to have some kind of drive to go promote the book while you know, it's
Right.
writing the book is only half the journey. Now, once the book hits the market, well, now it's got a whole nother journey. You've got to kind of put some energy behind.
Right.
And that
Yeah.
means doing book signings or interviews, on
Yeah.
podcasts and things like that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, and speaking of podcasts, this is actually a live stream we're doing right now. It's on 3 platforms, but we also pull it down as a podcast. So I'm going to take a minute. I'm going to say it's Brian Moreland, and I'm going to spell that for y'all that are listening to the show and not actually watching, because you're not seeing it on the screen. So it's Brian, Brian Moreland, Moreland. So it's brianmoreland.com. You can find his stuff there. You can follow him on Twitter. It's twitter.com. I'm sure if you just type in Brian Moreland and search, you're going to find him. You want to follow him there. And so check out all his books are there. I mean, most of your books are on Amazon and other platforms as well, aren't they?
Yeah, they're all on Amazon and Barnes and Noble as well.
Right. So you can go and find Brian's book. I mean, obviously it's a great time. Halloween's coming up. Do you feel that, do you get a spike in, during the holidays, or once Halloween kind of hits and into Christmas, or
Yeah,
does it
definitely
depend on the
Halloween.
marketing?
Yeah, it depends on the marketing. And I mean, Halloween's always a good month for promoting horror. So
Right, right. So, and you did some stuff with like Comic Con, or more like,
yeah, I did Dallas
the
Comic Con for a couple of years, and I've done several horror conventions
uh-huh,
where I just go book a table, or
uh-huh.
I've had publishers book tables and invite the authors to come
Right,
sign
right.
books at the convention. So that's been a way to meet fans face to face, and sell books and sign books also.
Right, and autograph books, and you also
Hmm.
get to meet, like you say, some of the other authors, because that's the other
Yes.
thing. The writing is kind of being an author is kind of a solitary life while you're writing, but then, and so you kind of, I've had a lot of people tell me that, it's just they felt so alone. They feel like they were out there by themselves in the wilderness, trying to fight this fight. And and then when they meet other authors, it's like, oh my gosh, they finally
Yeah.
found somebody that understands,
I Yeah, and I recommend that authors go to writers conferences and just meet
yeah,
other authors, because you realize that there's a lot of us that are just we have the passion for stories, we have the passion for books, and we're
yeah.
all in this. We're all pushing our
In the
products.
same thing. Yeah, we're all
We
pushing
want to
our
find
books at the
readers.
same time. Yeah, we want to find
Yeah.
readers, and that's it. And then you do, and because then you can cross promote, or you can maybe do something together, or joint venture, or co-op advertising. I mean, one of the things that we do with our group, we have a group that meets monthly that's called the Dynamic Authors Group, and we were originally meeting in Dallas at a restaurant with just some local authors. Just wanting to meet with some of my local folks, just so they would be encouraged, because I knew that a lot of them, it was their first time, and
Right.
they were coming out of other industries like teaching, or computers, or restaurant business, or whatever, and so they weren't used to marketing and talking to people about their book. And so, so to be encouraging, and so they could meet other people, we started meeting, and then COVID hit. So then we had to get online. We couldn't meet at a restaurant, and so we started meeting online, and then that opened the door for me to bring in people, other clients from all around the country. So, we've got people from Canada. One of our people's in Hawaii. I know you spent some time in Hawaii, and
Yep.
so, it's just been great that we can add these other people from Atlanta and Florida, and that Michigan, that we wouldn't have ever gotten to talk to if we'd have just continued to do the local thing. So, So it's a great thing, but we want to do that. We want to encourage you to go to these writers' con. We go to the library conference. That's one of the big conferences that we do because Texas, obviously, the biggest state in the
Yeah.
union, but next to California, I guess. And so, 4 or 5,000 librarians, public and school librarians in one place. And you don't sell a lot there. I mean, we've sold 50 or 100 books on every year or
Yeah.
so, most of our people do, but it's really more about getting in front of those decision makers so that
Yeah.
when they
Building awareness.
yeah, it's really helpful, isn't it? So
Mm-hmm.
so what have you found to be the most helpful? Is it the conferences and stuff from a marketing standpoint, or is it you doing
Yeah.
any online stuff or just your Twitter push, where you pushing out? I
Well, I've
mean,
done virtual book tours where I get interviewed for different blogs, or maybe I write a guest post
uh-huh.
when a book releases. I might write an article that's sort of connected. Like I've written some World War II articles
Mhm.
that where I can mention my book.
Uh-huh.
And I've used BookBub, uh, which is a great source. It's an investment, but it's a great source
Right.
for they have an email
List that
list.
goes out. Like I get twice a day. Every day I get a list from them of books
Yeah.
because I signed up and said I like this kind of genre. I like these kinds of books. And so every day I get a list of 7 or 8 or 10 books that are new releases, or maybe they're an
Hmm.
old release that somebody's, like you say, doing a special deal for because they got the rights back to it. And so they've redone it and re-released it, or maybe done a second edition and or put it together as a package deal like you did with your 3 short stories. So all of those are things that you can do. Those are things
Hmm.
that we recommend. I was recommending last week that you still do a bookmark, some printed collateral, whether that's a bookmark, a postcard, or a business card, something that has your information. Because sometimes when people come to a conference, they don't want to lug a bunch of books around.
Yeah,
You
I hand
know,
out bookmarks,
yeah. And
so
it
that's
has your
usually
information on it. It's got your website, your name, whatever information you want to give people so they can get in touch with you and find you. So again, that's Brian Moreland. It's BrianMoreland. So if you're listening, go check him out. Go. His books are on Amazon. They're on Barnes and Noble. They're in the stores, I'm sure, and retail outlets. And then if you love horror conferences, is it starting to pick up again? Or I guess they didn't probably do much for the last couple of years, but we've just now starting to get notices
yeah.
about new
I went to
stuff.
one. Yeah, I went to one a year ago during the summer. That was when it started to open back up again.
Right.
Uh, and I've seen a few since then. There were a few that I could have gone to this year that I don't even think you had to wear masks this time. So
Right.
it seems to be, coming back that you can go to conferences.
Right, right. So we would recommend that to check out the things in your area and your genre. If you're writing romance, there's going to be some conferences. You're writing horror, like Brian talked about, there's going to be some conferences. If you're writing children's books, there are a lot of educational conferences or preschool or daycare or pre type things. There's a lot of like parenting and educational groups around. I mean, we went to something over in Hurst, Euless, Bedford, which is between Dallas and Fort Worth. And it was something parents put on because and they wanted authors there because they had different educational, vendors basically. And we were just one of the other educational vendors. But we did well there because they were promoting to parents, with young
Hmm.
children. So our children's books, So there are lots of opportunities. There's lots of ways and places to sell your book. You just got to believe in yourself. You got to believe in that. You got to find some people that are in a similar situation that are writing their stuff too, so that you can be encouraged, right? Because
Right.
and you meet the most marvelous people, don't you, Brian? I mean, haven't you met the most marvelous people, other authors and
Oh yeah.
publishers?
Yeah. At every one of the conventions, I make new friends that are fellow authors, and
Mhm.
we've even had each other's. Like I write a blog, and I'll interview them for my blog, or post. If they have a new release coming out, I'll post a new release announcement for their book, and they've done the same for me. So there's a lot of helping each other out.
Right. Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, so be sure to start taking those notes and taking those names. I mean, even before, even if you haven't published yet, start making that list of who your favorite authors are and who do you want to meet, because one day you might be in the room with Brian and you can go up and say, "Brian, I saw that interview you did with Liz, and I was so glad to meet you. My name is John or Carol or Bob or whatever, Shania, whatever your name is," but begin to do that early on, and also find those resources too, because I always tell people to look at books that you like, and look at there, see who wrote the cover, see who their agent is. Usually they in the acknowledgments, people will tell you, they'll tell you who their publisher is, they'll tell you who their editor is, they'll tell you who's designing their cover. Maybe it's on the second or third or fourth page of the book, maybe it's at the end. But begin to look for those things if you really want to be in this business. And it's a long-term play, isn't it, Brian? It's
Yes,
not you and I haven't been in this for a couple of years. We've
that's
been in
right.
this for 30 or 40 years, hadn't we?
Mm-hmm.
And and even you, I, like you say, my folks had a Christian bookstore and they opened in 1972. I was 11. So, it wasn't until recently that I kind of went, I really been in the business like 48 years, not 30 years, because, I was around books, I was counting books, I was reading books, and you were
Yeah,
doing the same with the movies, watching
yeah.
classic horror on Saturday mornings. I mean, you were getting that education, you were letting those
Yeah. I
stories.
was learning storytelling
Yeah.
through watching films, and
Uh,
then and then I did a lot of reading when I became a teenager, and
right.
I sort of married the two by the time I got to college.
Right, right. Well, did you ever think about writing a more of a graphic novel? Or have you done that? Or have you thought about that? They said, I know you that you like comics, or I know you the Swamp Thing
Yeah, I
and
mean,
some of those.
I would love to have. I've talked to some companies about adapting my book into a graphic novel, but I don't really know the story. I don't know how to do the story structure to be the writer
Right,
and work with the artist. It's all. I would just uh, prefer to find a company that handles that part and
right.
turn it over to their writers and designers,
Uh-huh.
uh, and let them handle the adaptation of it.
Right, right. Well,
Mhm.
it's really interesting because I had two for the first time. I actually had a children's graphic novel with with a lady out of South Dakota that was
Uh huh.
about basically self-esteem for little girls, a little Hispanic girl. And then I had another, and actually he's Hispanic too, out in New York. My niece's best friends from church, and so Nick had been working on this graphic novel, and it's called Flight Team. So it's like the four superheroes, and they're fighting evil. The evil's trying to take over the city, and they're
Uh huh.
doing the thing. But they blew the doors off at the library conference. I mean, everybody came over to talk to them because they had graphic novels. So I'm just going to encourage you to do that or figure that out, or maybe whatever, keep pursuing that, because I think I know that she had like 75 copies and I think they had 60, and they sold everything but one or two books. They either
Wow.
sold or gave them away. And partly what they did is they sold at the table, and then we were part of the author signing. They had like special areas set up for authors to sign books too. And so basically, at first they were selling them, and then they started saying, "Well, we're going to be over at the book signing at 2 o'clock, and if you come over there, we're going to give a few away for free. You may have to stand in line, or you can buy it right now if you want to buy it. Because we may run out. We only have so many copies." And they just both of them blew the doors off. And everybody came over and looked, and they came over too because there were 4 or 5 of us authors together, and that doesn't, we were independent authors. And they were
Uh
like,
huh.
well, y'all are all independent. You're not really with a publishing group, because you at library conference, you either have the big publishers and the medium-sized publishers, or you have independent people that are just an author and they've just booked the table themselves. But we were like 5 different authors selling 5 different things, working together, and they're together. And that we got a lot of attention because of that, because that was unusual, especially to the librarians, public and school librarians. They just were like, they're used to going to, Scholastic or, or somebody like that, or, Macmillan, or, Houghton Mifflin, or somebody
Speak mostly to the publishers.
Right. Yeah. They're used to just getting in line with the publishers, and the publishers do have their authors there signing, they're giving away some books, but they're not, they were, like you say, they were there with the publisher, not as independents working together to help each other. And these kids were great. And I call them kids, they'd hate me, but they were 30 and 30, 28 to 35, and the rest of us, to me, that's a kid.
Right.
But they did well, and people loved it, so I mean, we're all going, man, maybe we need to write a graphic novel. So keep that in the back of your mind, because I know your horror stuff would be fabulous. Like you say, it's just adapting it to that smaller version, because obviously, it's going to be 80, 100 pages and not 200 or 300 pages, like you're used to writing. But keep on the lookout for that, and don't give that up. I would pursue that, because I think that's a whole different market. And that's what they told us. The librarian said, we can get them to look at a graphic novel, and then we can get them to read other books.
Right. Yeah, I started with comic books myself before.
Right. We have a hard time just going straight to books, because they're so used to being on, the technology and the computers and the tablets, and they get so much visual stimulation that they said, but if we can start them with graphic novels, then we can ease them into more, story to books that are, that have less, pictures, that don't have pictures. And so they said, it's just our process now. I mean, it's just what we're having to do, and it's just, and it starts young, like you say. So I was really excited to see that. So, well, Brian, our 30 minutes is up. I mean, I can't believe it, but if there's one last thing that you'd want to share with folks, tell us what you're doing next, or what you got coming up, or what's out right now. And then if you've got one last thing you want to tell our folks about, or that you would recommend, go ahead and do that, and then I'll wrap us up.
All right. Well, I just signed a book deal for my next novel, which is called They Stalk the Night. And that comes out, I think, right now it's scheduled for October 2023. And that's set in the winter. They're in a blizzard, and it's a monster creature that's stalking a small town up in Minnesota during a blizzard. And some advice I'd give is just, don't give up, stay persistent. Like I was persistent for 18 years, and that's when my career finally started. And I still, even when I feel like it's becoming too much work, or, I'm not getting enough success, I just stay persistent at it. And I believe that, opportunity shows up, but I've gotten lucky breaks, and that's because I stayed with it.
Right. Yeah. So, because you kept doing the work, and you kept taking some kind of creative action, whether it was a call, or the writing, or just sitting down to write consistently, or
all that effort eventually pays off in some way.
Right. Yeah. Well, great. Well, Brian, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate our friendship. I look forward to seeing you again soon in person instead of virtually. But so this has been your host, Liz Lawless, your co-host, Liz Lawless, for Author Adventure. And next week, come back and see Russ and I, and we'll be interviewing somebody again. We'll be talking a little bit about technology and some online marketing strategies as a part of our 5 Secrets to Success. And so we're here every Tuesday at 5 p.m. And hopefully we'll see you back here next week. Go back to our YouTube channel and subscribe, and watch this great interview with Brian Moreland, our horror author. And go find his books for Halloween. If you got somebody that likes horror, this is the gift to give to them this Christmas. Thanks so much, Brian. See you soon.
All right. Thanks for having me. Thank you.